Coming up, Denmark is way ahead of the climate curve, using wind, solar and biomass to power local communities.
Because what we do here is that we solve an environmental problem. We take all the residual waste that we cannot recycle or reuse and we turn it into energy.
We visit this climate trailblazer to understand what one of the happiest nations in the world is doing to meet its sustainability goals.
Whoa, what is this?
So this is pretty much where we store all the residual waste to be turned into energy.
This is Just 2 Degrees on TRT World.
It sure stands out, doesn't it? It is an architectural wonder.
Welcome to one of Europe's oldest capitals, renowned for its green spaces, cool harbour hangouts and shopping. This is Copenhagen, with more than 1.3 million people densely packed in an area 90 square kilometres. Denmark, with more than 5.9 million people, is the most densely populated country in the Nordic region. Denmark is also known for its monarchy, which is among the world's oldest. Queen Margrethe II has reigned for over 50 years. She's Europe's longest-serving current head of state and the world's longest-serving current female head of state. Denmark has a constitutional monarchy. The Queen's main tasks are to represent Denmark abroad and be a figurehead at home. Here, she doesn't independently perform political acts, but she does sign all acts of parliament once countersigned by a cabinet minister. Like many royal buildings across the world, Denmark's is impressive. Copenhagen's more modern architecture is also visually striking. In fact, Copenhagen was designated the UNESCO International Union of Architects World Capital in 2023 for its people-centric urban design and sustainability. But we're here to see a lot more than pretty buildings. I'm here to learn about Denmark's climate goals, and I know just the person to point us in the right direction. Annan is Denmark's ambassador to Türkiye. The last time we spoke, he invited us to Copenhagen and other cities in the country that use renewable energy. Mr. Ambassador, it's good to see you. My first impression of Copenhagen is that there are a lot more bikes on the road. Are there more bicycles than cars?
I would assume that there are actually more bikes than cars in Copenhagen. And that is primarily due to the fact that people enjoy taking their bikes, not only for leisure, but also to and from work, to and from university, to and from school. So basically, if you live in Copenhagen, you don't really need a car. And just to give a personal example, I've never had a car myself in Copenhagen. I've always either used my bicycle or walked, or if it's a bit longer, taken public transportation.
Mr. Ambassador, what does Copenhagen mean? How did it become a capital?
Oh, it goes back many, many hundreds of years. It is basically, it means the harbor of the merchants. And that was because of its strategic location at the entrance to the Baltic Sea. So basically, back in the days, Denmark also covered the southern part of Sweden. So basically, Copenhagen was very strategically located at the access to the Baltic Sea. And that, of course, gave the king an opportunity to collect taxes and control the trade in and out of the Baltic Sea. So Copenhagen is very much founded on trade and obviously sea trade.
You know, looking around this park, it's obvious Copenhagen is a very windy city. How does the country use wind to its advantage?
Yeah, no, Copenhagen has a lot of wind, and if you use your bicycle, sometimes it's to your advantage, but you very often feel that it is to your disadvantage. But jokes aside, wind is playing a pivotal role today for the transformation for energy consumption in Denmark. We have a lot of onshore and offshore wind farms. And basically today, on an average, 70% of all electricity consumed in Denmark comes from renewable energy resources. and that number will only continue to increase. And I would also say that our electricity consumption is also continuing to increase because we're going away from fossil fuels for transportation to electric vehicles.
I'm really excited about this, Mr. Ambassador. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you, and I invite you to travel around Denmark for yourself to see the offshore, the onshore, and all the other attempts that Denmark is doing on transforming its energy, its economy from a fossil fuel-driven economy to a renewable energy-driven economy. But I hope you enjoy your stay in Denmark.
It's clear there's a lot to learn from Copenhagen as a city. Let's start with the way waste is handled.
An ambitious plan to build the cleanest and most efficient energy way of getting rid of waste while producing energy. Trust the Danish to get it done, and to do it with style. This is the award-winning Amager Bakke facility.
This is Amager Bakke in downtown Copenhagen. It was opened in 2017. It sure stands out, right? But it is an architectural wonder, but it's a lot more than that.
Within the walls of this heat and power plant, around 400,000 tons of solid waste are burned every year. It is effectively a one-stop shop that turns trash into climate treasure.
This is the start of the journey at Amager Bakke, where roughly 300 waste trucks come in every day. They come in here, they reverse, and then they unload the residual waste into the bunker. And it's of course only the residual waste which cannot be reused or recycled.
So what's the capacity of the bunker? How many trucks come every day?
Nearly 300 trucks come every day from Monday to Friday, and the capacity is around 22,000 tons of residual waste that can be stored on the inside.
Wow. Where is all this waste coming from? What does it consist of?
It's coming from local households as well as companies, and it consists of all those parts that cannot be reused or recycled. So the classic example is the pizza box with all the oil and grease and so on from pizza. That's non-recyclable. That ends up here. The diapers and so on. This is the waste bunker. So this is pretty much where we store all the residual waste that comes into Amager Bakke to be turned into energy.
All right, so I'm seeing a lot of waste from the trucks being dumped in here. Exactly what process happens here? And I'm also seeing clothes.
Yes. What happens is that the waste is coming in, it's unloaded by the trucks, it's 300 a day. Then the claws lift it up and piles it up in like a huge pile, where it's mixed as good as possible to be as homogeneous as possible. And from then on, it's lifted up and then dumped into the two furnaces when they're in need of fuel.
All right, let's see the furnaces.
So this is the belly of the beast, the furnace. And this is where we incinerate 35 tons of residual waste every hour.
Every hour?
Every hour, and we even have two, another over there. Yeah. So temperatures around 1,100 degrees, effectively killing all hazardous parts. And then, as the positive byproduct, we create energy by heating up water and turning it to steam.
This is where all the energy for Amager Bakke comes from.
Yeah, nearly
this
all
burned
energy.
Rubbish.
Yes, burning rubbish and making use of the surplus heat to heat up water and turn it into steam.
Right. Where does the steam go?
The steam from both the boilers end up going to one pipe, which we see right here. So this is where we have a lot of steam running through at very, very high temperature, 440 degrees, running into that room on the other side of the concrete wall, and then making the turbine running around, creating electricity for up to 90,000 households.
This isn't hot, is it?
It's not too hot here since it's insulated, but on the inside it's 440 degrees.
Wow.
And then after producing the electricity, we take out the heat by through a heat exchanger, where we heat up the cool district heating water, and then we reheat it to 110 degrees and send it to the city.
Amager Bakke's carbon capture plant filters up to 500,000 tons of carbon dioxide a year and emits only water vapour. The Danish say the air up here is as fresh as in the mountains. Other filtration systems and technologies help the facility produce more clean water that it uses, and has reduced its nitrogen oxide, dioxins, and hydrogen chloride gas emission levels by nearly 100%. Amager staff say it is the cleanest incineration plant in the world.
And looking at the demonstration carbon capture unit, where the long-term goal is to capture 500,000 tons of CO2 a year by capturing the carbon from the flue gas at this place. This plant will be commissioned most likely in September this year, and is going to capture carbon from the flue gas, where at one step you give the flue gas like a wet shower with a liquid, it's amines, and that's chemically reacting with the CO2 molecules. And then you've captured the CO2 just as you capture CO2 when you in a liquid when you create sparkling water. And in the next step, you want the CO2 to be released from this liquid. So that's where you heat the liquid up, and at 110 degrees Celsius, the CO2 will release. That's just what's happening in summertime when you have a cold draft beer and it turns hot, then it turns flat. Carbon capture and storage is one of the key elements in Danish climate policies, since we know that we are not able to meet our 2030 targets of cutting emissions by 70% if we don't implement carbon capture at different point sources. So that's instrumental in meeting our future climate goals.
Amager Bakke plays a major role in Copenhagen's goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2025. The company even provides surrounding areas with electricity and heat.
But there's more to this facility than converting waste into energy. In the classic Danish style of creating welcoming, comforting spaces, Amager Bakke includes recreational facilities, from a full snow ski slope to hiking trails and the world's tallest climbing wall. This part of the compound is called Copenhagen and sees between 40 and 60,000 visitors annually. With its design chops, combining form and function, Amager Bakke is a landmark in the Copenhagen cityscape that celebrates clean waste disposal, clean energy, and good, clean fun. Jacob Simonsen is the company's chief executive officer.
Right here, what we do is that we burn residual waste and make district heating and electricity. And we receive about, a lot of waste every day, and we turn it to electricity and district heating for the city. Enough actually to power about 90,000 homes annual need of electricity and heat. Yeah. And in Denmark, it's a lot.
Yeah, Amager Bakke is clearly super important for Denmark reaching its climate goals.
It is actually, because what we do here is that we solve an environmental problem. We take all the residual waste that we cannot recycle or reuse, and we turn it into energy.
Talk about the construction of the facility. Why is this in the center of Copenhagen?
Yes.
Give us details on why it was put where it is.
Well, we actually had an old waste-to-energy plant, which was sitting just next to here. But it was built 50 years ago, and it didn't deliver the environmental need that we actually have. So we decided to build a new plant. And in the last 50 years, the city has come closer to this point, right, to this area. So instead of trying to keep the city out, we made a decision to try to embrace the city and try to bring people closer to our installation. And that's why when we tendered out the architectural competition for this site, we asked them to give their bid on an inclusive plant. And it was the Bjarke group who won that tender by creating a ski slope. And what you see here is actually the vision of Bjarke. So he was the main man behind the idea of making a ski slope on top of a power plant, which is a fantastic idea and also a really crazy idea, because having a ski slope, this is a power plant, right? We make huge amounts of energy. We have steam in pipes with very high pressure and chemical in big tanks and 1,000 degrees in the kilns and so on. So it was a lot of engineering that you had to do to put a ski slope on top of a power plant. But it is doable. You can see it here, one-to-one in real life.
Can you give us some detail about the emissions from this plant?
Yes, it is actually quite easy, because what you see coming out of the stack is pretty much just water vapor and, of course, CO2. And CO2, we are trying to do something about that. We are trying to implement carbon capture technology at ARC so that we will also limit our climate footprint in the future.
You host quite a bit of delegations, many students come here.
Yes.
What are you hoping to impart on these people?
Well, I think it is very important that we as people living our normal lives, we use a lot, we consume a lot, and we produce waste. And a lot of it, of course, we want to recycle as much as possible, but there is a part of it that is non-recyclable. And this part is an environmental problem. And just living your everyday life in the city, you create this problem, and you have to have installations solving this problem, or you will eventually drown in waste, right? So here we try to turn a waste problem into actually a benefit for the city, and the benefit is energy.
And Denmark is also trying to help other countries. What role has Amager Bakke played in influencing other countries' climate policies?
Well, I think it has been a great privilege to receive a lot of delegations here in Amager to actually bring about, how do we actually go about making modern waste management happen? Because you need installations like this to solve it, and by actually also putting a ski slope, it doesn't have to be a ski slope, but actually thinking about having some activities that could involve the local public is a great idea, because we don't have this NIMBY effect, not in my backyard. This is a park area where people from the local community can come with their picnic baskets and have fun and enjoy actually also skiing if they want to.
As we mentioned earlier, Copenhagen's been named the world capital of architecture. Now, living up to that title won't be easy or as glamorous as that sounds, but as the country looks to lessen its environmental impact, a number of sustainable solutions may prove helpful. Brick by brick, the structure slowly takes shape. What might pass for a run-of-the-mill construction site is actually an architectural pavilion, exploring the relationship with bricks, which are energy and resource intensive.
We want to bring attention to the difference in tiles and the difference in the way we use them. So this is an example represented by 3 arches, the pavilion, cross arches, where there's a difference in the kind of stone that we use for each one of them. The small one is the traditional solid brick, and we can only get as far as that size.
Several architectural firms are involved in this project, including Denmark-based AART. Its program, Bricks in Common, aims to show there's a more intelligent, climate-friendly way to build.
What you need to know about these 3 arches is that they have the same CO2 footprint, but they are different in size. So that is depicting how much more you can build if you build more clever.
While the smallest arch uses traditional resource-heavy bricks, the largest is built mainly with recycled bricks and lime mortar, which enable it to be broken apart and reused.
Copenhagen and many of the cities that we all know and love are built by bricks. And here in Denmark, for example, we have used the same size, same format of bricks for 130 years. And the brick lasts for 500 years. So the message is as well that if you use the right mortar or lime mortar, you can take the bricks apart again and build new buildings in 100 years.
13 pavilions are popping up across Copenhagen as part of the world capital of architecture, showcasing the latest in Danish design while addressing how to live and build with lower carbon emissions. These structures, collectively named From 4 to 1 Planet, Next Generation Architecture, explore how to reduce the environmental impact of residential buildings, from using alternative materials like rammed earth.
When it comes to architecture, you have to make it tangible. You have to make people feel, sense, and get into what is this really about. It was like an obvious, wonderful idea that we should invite the local architects to create and build what they really think is the newest of the newest when it comes to sustainable architecture.
And to take a look at this pavilion, a toilet placed on a busy Copenhagen walkway by Architects Without Borders. It's called BioCenter and explores a project in Uganda that turns human waste into a combustible gas. The group says once the gas is collected and refined, it can be used in stoves or for heating bath water.
In an informal settlement in Uganda, about 70% of the health problems will be caused because of poor sanitation. So by giving people a possibility of having a shower and a toilet, you reduce that health factor or risk.
It's also a timely reminder that basic sanitation still remains a luxury for many. There is a lot to manage when it comes to streamlining Denmark's sustainability goals. The Danish Energy Agency is in charge of energy production and local climate initiatives. It was founded in 1976 and operates under the Ministry of Climate, Energy and Utilities. It's tasked with reducing Denmark's greenhouse gas emissions and supporting utilities that supply water, waste management and telecommunications. The DEA also participates in energy and climate politics internationally. Turkish and Danish officials, for instance, worked together on several energy projects with particular focus on the development of geothermal energy, which Türkiye has plenty of. Kristoffer Bottzauw is the organization's Director General. What are Denmark's climate goals and what role does the Danish Energy Agency play in that?
We have a Climate Act passed in 2020 saying that we want to reduce the CO2 emissions by 70% from 1999 until 2030. And the current government have more ambitious targets, saying that in 2045 we need a climate neutral society, and in 2050 we want a climate negative society, meaning that we want to reduce by 110%. Well, since the oil crisis in the 1970s, Denmark have been on the green transition. We have been doing energy planning, district heating, a lot of wind and solar, and trying to get our society on a green way to a new economy, actually, to decouple growth and CO2 emissions. And at the moment, we have more than 50% of our power productions that come from wind. And even though we have so much wind and solar, our security of supply is still 99.996%, meaning that an average Dane can have power on the switch all year long except 20 minutes. And that's a European record. Denmark is a small country. We are 6 million inhabitants. We stand for 0.1% of total global CO2 emissions. So what we're doing here actually have no effect on the climate globally. So we want to go out, tell our do's and don'ts to other countries, and that's why my agencies have 24 partnership countries covering 70% of the global CO2 emissions. And among them we have Türkiye, one of our oldest partnerships, and we are sharing our knowledge when it's come to energy planning and district heating at the moment. The energy islands is a concept and an idea of harvesting the potential for offshore wind. Especially in the northwest Europe, we have a lot of offshore wind potential. And at the moment we're looking at the Baltic Sea and the North Sea. And at the Baltic Sea we already have an island called Bornholm, where we will produce 3 gigawatt offshore wind near shore. And in the North Sea we will go out 100 kilometers out at sea and try to find a model to harvest the potential out there. And at the moment we're looking at 10 gigawatt offshore wind, and that's equal 10 million European households use for power. So the North Sea will be a powerhouse not only for Denmark but for most of Europe. NIMBY means not in my backyard, and that's when you want to establish new wind parks or solar parks. The neighbors are often against it. And we are trying to start up a dialogue with the neighbors early in the beginning to let them understand what is the project actually about, and also to share some of the income from the project. And I think even though we haven't found the perfect solution yet, I think we have a good dialogue with the neighbors, and the NIMBY problems are possible to handle. But the dialogue is important, and to share the income is also a very important element.
From one of the most efficient and environmentally friendly waste-to-energy plants in the world, to the limited number of cars and the use of wind, solar and biomass to power local economies, Denmark seems well on its way to meeting its climate goals. It might be one of the reasons the nation's been voted one of the happiest countries in 2023.
And that's it for this episode of Just 2 Degrees. Until next time, bye.